Hello to everyone. Welcome to episode 1 of Sales versus Marketing. Sales and marketing are obviously the two most important functions for driving business growth. The reason I've set up this live series was to look at the relationship between the two and how they do and do not work together, and what can we do about it. Today, I'm delighted to say I have a very special guest, Maggie Sarfo. She's the CEO of Mears Consulting, which is a leading growth enablement company. Maggie, first of all, thank you for agreeing to come on my very first show. You're obviously very brave.
Thank you, Phil. It's a pleasure to be here. I just love the topic, so I just couldn't refuse when you said, would you like to come?
No, well, thank you. I'd also like to say thank you to everyone who's going to be joining live, but also for those who are watching on the replay. So, whether you're on the live or the replay, please leave comments, and we'll come back to you either during the show or afterwards. So Maggie, if you wouldn't mind sort of introducing yourself, you've obviously got a wealth of experience in sales and marketing. So if you can give yourself a little bit of an intro, so we can know a little bit more about you and what you do.
Thank you, Phil. So hi everyone, as Phil kindly introduced, I am the CEO and founder of Mears Consult Limited, which is a growth enablement firm, and we work with business leaders as well as entrepreneurs along the lines of exploring new ways of being, new ways of leading, and new ways of growing business exponentially. My background is from 18 years of business consulting, sales and sales leadership. And the last role, my last corporate role was with a company called Gartner. Some of you would be aware of Gartner. And so I had the opportunity to see such a wide variety of businesses, especially in the tech world, going to market and how important it is for the various factions of sales and marketing to come together, and what best in class looks like when they're doing this well, and on the other side, what doesn't work when they're not. And in our current business, we continue to do that by really opening lines of communication, because we are all about exponential growth, and we need sales and marketing to align to make this happen.
Well, Maggie, that's exactly why I asked you on the show, because I think you've got a lot to add to this conversation. So Maggie, how big a problem do you think sales and marketing not working together, being misaligned, how big a problem do you think that actually is?
I think it's a huge problem, full stop. Because when we look at the sales and marketing function, especially in the eyes of most people, sales and marketing can be one and the same thing. It's the activity that we do to the outside world to bring in customers. And so it's so important that as businesses grow and we divide the functions into separate functions in terms of sales on one hand and marketing on the other, is important that they work very cohesively, because that is the revenue engine of the business.
Yeah, communication. From my experience, speaking to both sides of the the divide. Hopefully there isn't a divide, but communication or lack of is quite often quite problematic. So neither has visibility about what the other is doing, and that can obviously their own, if they've got collective goals and objectives, that can slightly go out the window if they're not in sync. And the strategy and planning of what both are doing will be affected, which will then affect the performance of the campaign. So yeah, I agree with you. It is potentially quite a big problem, but not every company has as big a problem as others. Moving on to there's obviously big corporates, and then there's one-man bands and in between. What are your thoughts about bigger versus smaller companies and their problems with the sales and marketing team not working together?
So it depends on how we're defining them. As you said, it's far wide and ranging. And I want to say
Yeah.
hi to Ed, for joining us.
Yes.
Um, so when we I think the problem gets bigger because large organizations are more complex. However, I think it's also based on the culture of the organizations. That is what I'm increasingly finding. And so I think in the very early stages where perhaps you may have one person who wearing both hats of sales and marketing, the problem is probably non-existent. They just have to figure out how much of their time they allocate to sales and marketing and how it works to bring the results they're looking for.
Hmm.
As they start to grow bigger, maybe a team of 20 where they now have a separate sales team and a separate marketing team, I think then is when you need to really make sure that there's a strong alignment between whoever wears the hat for the sales in terms of leading the sales team and whoever wears the hat for leading the marketing team to align. And for me, when I talk about alignment, it's not necessarily just the alignment between the sales and marketing teams. Yes, it is, but it's also because everyone looks after their own interest, which is
Yeah.
one of the reasons why silos are created in organizations.
Hmm.
I think what could help break some of these um, is they have an alignment directly to an overall goal, which is bigger than their own individual teams.
Yeah.
What I normally recommend when I'm having conversations, whether with the smaller organizations or the large organizations, is to have a KPI or an aligned goal that both of the leaders of these two factions are reporting into. And I normally recommend that the managing director or the CEO of the organization kind of sits at the top of this aligned
Yeah.
goal because it does help. And to be honest, I even spread it across, in terms of not just sales and marketing, but how about product? How about customer services?
Hmm.
Although, for today's conversation, we want to narrow it down to the sales.
Yeah. Well, product's obviously important because if the sales guys are, selling that, then they need to know how to position that with, the strategic, the people that they're actually, looking to put that in front of, because messaging is going to be different if you're selling to, one group of people and another group of people. So yeah, it's my feeling, the bigger it gets, obviously the more complicated it gets.
Yeah.
As companies are small, communications should be better. But obviously, if it's smaller, though, some people might be doing multiple jobs, and then time kicks in. Time
Yeah.
becomes a problem.
Yeah. And so they may drop the ball on certain aspects, maybe not enough sales, not enough marketing, or not the right mix for it to come together for them to achieve the revenue or the customer growth goals that they're looking for.
Yeah, we've just been joined by Robert as well. Hi, Robert and Ed. So we're talking obviously about bigger companies and smaller companies, but obviously as time moves on, traditional sales and marketing, people are getting older and they're being taken over, inverted commas, by the bigger proportion of millennials.
Mm-hmm.
What impact do you think that would have with as time goes on with what they want compared to sort of traditional sales and marketing?
I think we've already started seeing this shift. That is one of the reasons why digital marketing is such a big deal. Is one of the reasons why the CMO's budget, for instance, the chief marketing officer's budget, substantially started to grow over the last few years because
Mm-hmm.
how we looked at marketing traditionally had significantly shifted and it will continue to shift. And the same for sales as well. So you may come across social selling as really important. And so Even if we throw the pandemic into the mix, that throws a whole different angle into the game, because now we even have to look at how we sell remotely as well. I think what the younger generations bring to the mix is the fact that the traditional ways of selling and marketing would have to, I wouldn't say go away completely, but it has to evolve into a world where digital is also a big thing. A lot of our younger generations have grown not necessarily having phone calls as a main way of communication,
Yeah.
but maybe messaging or doing social and digital stuff. They also have a very different approach. So maybe the levels of formality um, need to be aligned in a way that especially your existing customers would prefer to be um, to be approached. Um, One of the key things when we set up Mary's Consult, it was inspired by my own observations of these kinds of shift, and
Mhm.
I called it the evolution of the buyer and implications for organizations,
Yeah.
especially sales and marketing teams. And so the buyer has, as a result of the world of technology, the world of the internet, the world of digital, they have chosen to also buy very differently. And again, I think the younger generations innately have a lot of these abilities to bring to the table when it comes to sales and marketing alignment. But ultimately, it's about them working together with some of the custodians of the traditional systems of
Yeah.
sales and marketing that we have in place,
The
bringing
sorry.
the customer to the fore as well.
Yeah. The pandemic's an interesting one. I was on a call earlier on today, a sort of quite a traditional marketing company. Their outreach was normally via phone, and they've realized that they're going to have to grasp this online, this online thing,
Yeah,
because obviously, phoning offices, if you're doing sort of telephone calls, you're not going to get in touch with the people.
yeah,
You need to have mobile phone numbers. You need to have,
reach them where they are.
yeah, exactly, different ways to sort of actually start a conversation.
Yeah,
So I think a lot of the pandemic stuff is not going anywhere. Companies are going to have to adapt to the sort of the new way of communicating, and the millennials will bring some of those skill sets naturally, because as you said, they've grown up with technology.
yeah, absolutely.
So I'm just going to check the comments. No comments yet, but we'll keep checking. So obviously sales, they've got their function, and marketing got their function. What's the number one complaint you hear from sales? Because sometimes they don't get on, as you're aware.
Yes. I think the number one, and it probably comes from both angles. I think sales think that marketing doesn't listen, or marketing doesn't necessarily understand how sales work for them, in terms of their processes, in terms of the sense of urgency to, when someone is interested in something, how quickly they need to move to close a deal, and the type of information they need, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
So I think sales sometimes, in my opinion, think that marketing doesn't necessarily always understand them,
yeah.
or don't get the urgency that is attached to the role they play for the organization.
I think that they're different sections. But one of the things I hear a lot is need to get better quality leads, need to
Yeah,
get better quality leads. And one of the stories I say is marketing, like doing events, and getting a list of people that attended with no sort of idea about whether those people are interested in a particular product is massively wasteful, because you're passing it then on to sales, who then have to follow up on these, very poor, they're not qualified at all, really. And how much time, man hours is wasted. I think it's, people within the organization, not completely appreciating the sort of potential wastage by passing stuff on. And that's back down to communication and, working as a team.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, having a process where what the sales teams go through is aligned in a way with what the marketing teams go through in terms of how they measured and everything. So, for instance, what some organizations are putting in place to support this is looking at things like the prospect journey or the
Mm-hmm.
buyer journey. And so,
Yeah.
what processes does the prospect go through even before they start speaking to someone in the organization, and then when they become a prospect and they start speaking to someone in the organization or being in touch, because it might not be speaking at all, it may be a case of they're watching, they're doing their own research, but
Yeah.
are we feeding to these things and making it easier for them to move closer and closer to having a conversation, or to clicking a button to say, I would be interested in having a conversation, or I would love to buy your product, full stop, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that's the early stage of the buyer's journey. And then once they are on board as well, there's a whole journey that sales and marketing also have to kind of reconcile, which we call in the customer journey.
Mm-hmm.
And so what, yes, they've now opted in to become your client on a particular product or service, but what does the journey look like? How are you going to upgrade them? Where
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
upsell opportunities going to come from as well? So yeah.
Yeah. I think, there's a lot of customers that just sit there and never get offered another product. And, as our American cousins call it, leaving money on the table.
Yeah.
And it's, having systems to identify who's likely to want a different product, from your existing database. And that should be the easiest sell you have, because you've already got them to hand money over. So getting them to hand more money over should be easy. I'm going to ask you the same question about, what's the number one complaint you hear about marketing from marketing?
So, similar to what the salesperson will say, I think is the understanding, first of all, but also the lack of usage for this content, for instance, or these opportunities and activities that marketing puts in place
Mm-hmm.
to help salespeople sell better, or to provide leads for salespeople. And we mustn't forget that in some organizations, traditionally, marketing was not necessarily tasked with leads as a KPI, a key performance indicator. They were more tasked with the softer elements of taking the brand of the company to the market, and making sure that the brand is top of mind, and making sure that they're kind of conditioning the market. And so as we move into this newer evolved states of the marketing world, we have to look at how, again, seamlessly the two can communicate and make this work. But I think ultimately, marketing could spend a lot of time preparing content, putting up events, and as you said, if they are not qualified enough, or if they are not aligned to the processes that the
Mm-hmm.
sales teams are going through in order to bring someone on board as a customer, then yeah, it will feel like their efforts are not being recognized or not used to the max, or to maximize the value of this effort and the resource they're putting into it.
Yeah, or receive. Well, one of the things I hear is they don't get the feedback. Not getting the feedback, so they can't improve what they're doing.
Yes.
So, if sales don't, it's back to communication. If sales don't provide them the insights with
Yeah.
how the programs are working, how can they improve it?
Exactly.
having an element of feedback and continual improvement is something that should be in place. We've got a question which is actually very apt, because that's one thing that was going on to Robert. So Robert's asking, how can you get sales and marketing to get along?
I think I think it's simple communication. Increasingly, what I'm finding, and this is coming up in a lot of conversations, not
Mm-hmm.
just with sales and marketing teams, but also with other business units and their tech teams when it comes to digital transformation programs. What a lot of people are doing to try and bridge this gap of not getting along is opening communications through what they're calling kind of emotionally intelligent ways of communicating. And maybe assuming that s- sales, for instance, is not doing what they're doing despite marketing and vice versa. We all want the best, for the organization. And so exploring the situation and looking at how we can culturally bring ourselves in a place where we use emotional intelligence. That is you understanding your own perspective of a
Yeah,
situation, and also understand or putting yourself in the shoes of someone to understand them actually starts to bring you together, and then you can sit down and have these conversations, or dissect a particular problem and
yeah,
find an emotionally intelligent way of resolving it. But it comes back to opening lines of communications where people are really open to making sure that they are addressing the key thing, which is how can we move along
yeah.
and solve the goals that we're looking to achieve for the organization and for
Well,
us as people.
yeah. Well, it's visibility about each other's goals and how they all work together
Yeah,
to sort of get improve that performance. Better communications is definitely something that I've seen. Tracking and feedback mechanisms to the different teams, so that they have that insight into whether something's working or not.
yeah.
Um, um, I've got a final question for you, which is slightly controversial.
It's
Who do
good.
you think is more important, sales or marketing, for business growth?
I think in our world that we live in, is both.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, Especially because the work we do is on the growth level. I think both teams or factions are hugely crucial for a business to move away from just growing organically to actually doing that exponential growth.
Mhm.
So if you want the growth to really take a step up to the next level, and be recognized for that, then definitely it's important to put importance on both of them.
Yeah. I it's difficult to say one's more important than the other, because obviously sales, if they don't do their job, then the business gets nothing. But if marketing don't do their job, the relevancy of your campaign is shot at the start. So you're putting people into a funnel who, if they're irrelevant, are never going to buy your product anyway. So you know it's it's a balance where they need to get along, otherwise it's not going to work.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I like what Robert is saying.
Yeah, Robert, you went right in for the hard question. Yeah, definitely. These are the questions that have to be asked as well. Going forward, myself and sort of Maggie are sort of in the neutral ground. In the future, I'm going to be bringing on people from sales and people from
Yeah,
marketing and getting their take, because obviously, um, theoretically, I come from a team background, used to play rugby, so it's all about playing your part in the team to win the game, and this is no different. It's about playing your part to win the game by basically growing the business, and everyone's happy. Win, win, win.
yeah, absolutely. And obviously, if I was to just wear my sales and sales leadership hat, I would just go for straight for sales, as the important one, because we need the revenue coming in. But it's a complete chicken and egg situation,
Yeah,
and
yeah, absolutely.
again, for exponential growth to happen, this cycle has to really complete itself, in a good way.
Yeah. So, as I say, future sessions, we're going to get a little bit more controversy, Robert. So tune in. That's actually going to, we're getting on for half an hour. So, Maggie, thank you very much for joining me today. As a thank you, what is the one thing that you would like help with today?
Well, thank you for inviting me, Phil. And I want to say thank you to every wonderful person who has joined us and who'll be listening to the replay as well. For me, where our business Mary's Consult is evolving more and more because of demand or what we get asked by our clients is this whole idea of using emotional intelligence to break some of these communication silos so that businesses can grow more exponentially. And so, um, one thing that I would love as a result of this conversation is for, any sales and marketing leader who would like to explore further, to get in touch with me. I offer a complimentary strategy review for us to just have a chat and see, where there could be a good opportunity to explore those synergies.
Good stuff. Well, as Maggie said to the viewers, thank you for watching live, and for those on the replay, many thanks for your support as well. I hope you've picked up some useful insights. As I said earlier, next week we're going to be diving into the other side of the story. So I'm going to have my guest is going to be a marketeer. So more details about that coming soon. And then the week after it's going to be sales. So hopefully there's going to be some more interesting stuff coming from that. So that's the end for myself and Maggie. So thank you very much again, and hopefully we'll see you next week.